So, being Christian means easier life, right? Not necessarily. So let's talk about it. Life can sometimes be a roller coaster, and we get it.
So tune into The Walk, where we'll explore the modern-day Christian journey by addressing challenging questions and trending topics faced by young adults today. No topic is off limits.
Alrighty, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Walk Live. So we are on season 2, episode 8. We're already on 2 seasons.
Crazy.
That's insane.
Crazy.
Right? And today we are covering a very, very special episode. It is called A Life Worth Living. As you all know, it's September, and September is Suicide Prevention Month. So we're going to be speaking on a very touchy subject and topic it could be for a lot of people. So we just wanted to tap into that, being the month of September is Suicide Prevention Month. With that being said, Andre, welcome back. Shane.
Welcome to be here.
I'm CJ. And we have the chaplain himself, Chaplain Joe.
Yes.
Glad to be here.
So glad that you're here. So glad that you're here.
Man, Chaplain Joe's a funny man. So before the cameras actually cut on, he was giving us some information and some backstories. So let's keep the jokes going, And
If you don't laugh around this man, something's wrong.
Exactly. Yeah, right.
You have to.
It might be
No, you have to.
it might be a chemical imbalance, right?
That's a part of prevention.
Yeah. All right.
Shout out to Lee over there. In the
Shout out to
controls.
Lee on the controls and the ones and
do
twos.
I don't
Right.
know.
I don't want to find out.
Right. Thank you.
So let's go to our first segment, which is going to be Won't He Do It?, where we talk about something great God's done for us. And if he did it for us, then he can do it for you.
Amen.
I'll kick things off. This week, it was kind of random. I don't remember which day, somewhere in the middle of the week. It was in the evening. I wasn't in the best frame of mind, and somehow I decided to listen to music. There's an album by All Nations that when they first released it, I really loved it. It had some amazing songs, and somehow I have no idea what happened. It got taken down, got deleted. I don't know, copyright. I have no idea, but it's gone. Doesn't exist. But in my library, I still see it. It's just grayed out. I can't listen to it. And so something was go try to find this album elsewhere. So I was on YouTube trying to find it, and I couldn't find the whole album, but I could find some of my favorite songs from that album. And I was listening to it, and it was just really what I needed in that moment.
Right.
The words were just so so impactful.
Yeah,
really
yeah.
lifted my whole spirits, my mind, everything. So I'm just thankful to God for actually pushing me or leading me to do that at that time. And who knows, maybe me not hearing those songs for so long and then finally hearing it now, has that really big impact. So that's my testimony. Thank God for that.
Amen.
On time, God.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah.
Music could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'll share mine now.
All right.
So, as you guys know, that I recently moved here probably a month or 2 ago, pretty much. So, from Palm Bay. And there, I had connections with different people, as far as if I needed a oil change or to get something changed on my car, those types of things, right? So I don't really have those connections here yet.
You need a new barber. You got to find a barber.
Right, and that was literally the first thing that I found. I was like, Shane, I need a barber. Before I closed on my house, I had a barber.
Okay.
That was the essentials, right? But so I needed to change my brakes on my car, right? So I know how to change them, but with 103 degree weather, I'm not doing that. That's not my ministry in the summertime. But so I asked in the group. So remember, you guys, I asked in the group. I was like, "Hey, do you guys know a mobile mechanic?"
Yeah.
And you guys were like, "No, we don't. We unfortunately don't know anyone." So I was like, "Man, So I was like, all right, so I guess I'll just go to AutoZone and, get the brakes and then try to, do some more research to figure out where I can get a mobile mechanic. So I went to AutoZone, I got the brakes, and something told me to kind of ask the attendant, like, hey, like, do you know any mobile mechanics around the area? And he's like, yeah, there's literally one right outside. I was like, oh, really? He's like, yeah. So yeah, the guy that's fixing that car right now, he's a mobile mechanic. I was like,
Wow.
oh, okay, cool. So I went outside. I spoke to the gentleman. It's like a father and son thing. So I went out there. I asked him. I was like, hey, how much would it be to change the brakes and rotors on my car? He told me the price. I found it reasonable. And I was like, can you do it today possibly? He's like, yeah, I'll be done in 20 minutes. What's your address? I'll come and do it right now.
Nice.
I was like, oh, perfect.
And you went to the AutoZone by your house?
Yeah, the one right up John. Yeah, it is. It's literally like you come out and it's right there. But so he came there and he knocked it out in probably like an hour, if that. So I was like, wow, like look how God literally worked it out. Like the answer to what I needed was literally right outside the door. So like I asked, and imagine if I didn't ask, I would have probably just left, and I would have been like, man, like I still need to find a mobile mechanic. But
sometimes the miracle and the testimony isn't what happens, but when it happens. That's how you know that God's thumbprint is. It's just confirmation that I'm with you, I got you.
Yeah.
In the big things and the small things.
Yeah.
And you did a good thing too, because like you started walking. You're like, all right, well, I asked, I tried, but let me go to AutoZone. Get the brakes.
Right.
First step.
Right.
Take care of the
faith.
rest.
Faith how it works. Yeah.
So
I was. My wife took our SUV to Toyota to get serviced, and they were like, everything's good. They did what they did, but they said the battery was fine. So we took my son to swim class, and then I was like, oh, let's go to Publix. I needed to get something. And we go to Publix, and son has a fun time, and we come out, and I hit the button on that brings up the trunk.
Yeah,
it wasn't open, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. I guess the battery's dead. And then so I force it open, which on these cars, you're only supposed to do that. And then I'm putting the groceries in, and my wife's like, the car's not starting. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is I'm like, this car is 2 years old. What do you mean it ain't starting?
There's no.
Bro, she's like, I think the battery's dead. I'm like, you said last week. I'm thinking about nap time. I'm thinking about lunchtime. It's 100 degrees. What are we gonna do? Bro, she popped the hood. This dude comes from his car and says, I think the battery's dead. I'm like, it's a new, like the car's only 2-3 years old.
Right.
We popped the hood. He has jumper cables. And I'm like, I have jumper cables in my car, but I'm like, not in the new car. He gave us a jump. Bro, AutoZone was right across the street. So we go to AutoZone, and I'm like, I don't care how much it costs. Got a new battery. They put it in. And I'm like, number one, I'm glad it happened today, and you weren't on the road by yourself.
Right.
Number two, we're in a parking lot, and we just so happened to park next to somebody with jumper cables, and we just so happened to be
right across the street from
1,000 feet from AutoZone. And I'm like, thank you, Lord.
Right.
That she wasn't on the highway.
Right, exactly.
And a week before, they said the battery was fine.
Wow.
At the dealer. So I'm like,
what dealership? Let me exit that dealership off if I need to get.
All I can do is say thank you, God. And then I went next week and got my battery changed. and that's why I was like, sometimes the miracle and the testimony isn't in what happens, but when it happens.
Yeah.
And in our case, it was where it happened.
Yeah. That's
so
good.
That's
good. That's hey, I like that.
And it ain't big, but I'm like, it's like God is with me.
Amen. Yeah.
Or maybe God was with my wife and I was just a witness.
Either way, he was nearby.
He was there. He was in the neighborhood.
And we got home in time for lunch and my son's nap time.
Amen.
So the day wasn't ruined.
I'll share. It's not necessarily brand new, but I think it was July or August where AYP had a convention in Texas. And that was the same weekend that the global blue screen thing happened, where, all these businesses gonna have like flights couldn't take off, hospitals couldn't do surgeries, like it was affecting the whole world. And so I was looking at my flight, I'm like expecting the worst, and it was on time still. I was like, okay. On my way to the airport, got the cancellation notice. I was like, of course. So I know the rest of the world is looking to rebook their flights too. So I was like, the first thing I see, I'm gonna just rebook it. And so I found something on another airline, and it was with Southwest. So I was going from Frontier to Southwest, and I was like, well, I hope Southwest like works out, but it's gonna cost me another, I think $350 just one way on the spot
To Texas?
to Texas. And I was like, should I do it? And something just like, do it. And I was like, man, I don't really want to be out $350 just like that. But I was just like, you know what? I do have a travel insurance plan, but I never really used it. But it's like an annual plan that I bought for myself. Like, I should call to see if it's going to be covered first, but no, let me just buy this ticket. Bought the ticket. Flight ended up being on time. And what I heard was like Southwest was like one of the only airlines like operating like that day. I guess they have, and people were making fun of them. They have such old systems. That's why. But it worked out this time. So I got to where I was going. Once I got back, I was like, all right, let me try to start, this claim. And I even called when I got to Texas, and I was like, what are the chances I get this money back? We're like, well, we don't know if this is covered.
Right.
He's like, you can try. Fast forward 2 weeks, I processed the claim. I'm going back and forth a couple of times, and I saw like an approval come through, and they sent back all the funds. And I was like, wow, thank God. There was a lot in me that was just like, once it canceled, I was just like, I don't need to go to Texas for the weekend, or like, it's not worth $350 more. But I'm glad I really listened to that inner small voice, and that's the way that I feel like God can still prove himself. It's in those situations where you feel like it's impossible and inconvenience financially. You're like, oh, I don't know if this is smart. And it's just like, prove me. Yeah. And like, that's where you can be like, oh, that's nothing but God.
Yeah.
So I like those type of situations. So I'm thankful that worked out.
And that lets you know that God is in the mundane things. Jesus says the numbers of the hairs on your head. I'm like, really? Come on. It lets me know that God pays attention even to small things and things I can't see.
Yeah. And Brenda Hunt says, thank you, Lord, for answering prayers even before I uttered them. That's a word. That's a word. That's a word. Wow. Well, that's the good thing about, I think, prayer. And it's not that God needs to now find out what you need. It's a realization for you sometimes of like putting yourself in the right position for him to be able to work. So I think that's the beauty of it. And it's really about our perspective for sure.
Absolutely.
But CJ, take us to the street.
I will take us to the street.
Clarify it, please.
So we talking about Sesame Street or?
Clarify.
All right. All right. The word on the street. So, as I get a bit older, I could be out of touch with, a lot of things that might be going on, on social media between like, the younger generation and all that stuff. But something to touch on right now, if anyone knows Sean P. Diddy Combs, then you might know what's been going on this past week, right? So we got elections and Diddy. So I'll read this small snippet I found on the web, right? So Sean Diddy Combs has reportedly been placed on suicide watch as he awaits trial in Brooklyn's Metropolitan Detention Center. Authorities did this as a preventative measure since Diddy is allegedly in shock and his mental state is unclear. This hip-hop mogul was arrested on Monday, September 16th in Manhattan, New York, following the Homeland Security's raid on his homes in Beverly Hills and Miami in March. The 54-year-old, he's 54? Wow. The 54-year-old will stay in jail as he awaits trial after being charged with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. The hip-hop mogul was denied bail a second time by a judge in Manhattan courtroom on Tuesday. And I'm surprised they didn't put the 1,000 bottles of the 1,000 bottles of baby oil in there. But reading that little snippet right there, we do have a question. So Diddy and other successful people often have a huge come up, but then a huge downfall, right?
Mhm.
Can we be successful without an Achilles heel, and how?
And for people that may not know
Mhm.
what that means, what does that mean? Achilles heel. Like, what do
So
you
an
mean by that?
Achilles heel is something that is your weakness, right?
Right.
So we don't worship any other gods, but in the Greek mythology, you had Achilles, so this dude was like the unstoppable,
Right.
literally, and then he got shot in the arrow in his Achilles,
Yeah.
and then that was it.
Okay.
That was it. So your Achilles heel is your pretty much your downfall or your biggest weakness.
Yeah.
So
Now, that's different from a thorn in the flesh. Some people make
Right.
those two the same thing. They're not.
mhm.
I would say yes and no. God says in Deuteronomy, remember the Lord who gives you the power to get wealth. I think it's Deuteronomy 8.
Mhm.
And God's basically saying you're going to have success. You're going to get land, cities, vineyards, promises, milk and honey, and you're going to forget me.
Mm.
I'm like, God is going to give you what you don't deserve. And it's like there comes a point where inherent in that success is this hubris, this pride, this idea that I woke up on third base and I hit a triple.
Mm.
No, you didn't. So sometimes I always say that, with Alpha generation, with Gen Z, my generation, I'm like, we're doing great things. It's not how we deal with failure, it's how are we going to deal with success.
Mm.
How do you juggle good things?
Yeah. Wow.
Stress
Yeah.
can be good. It's called eustress. And if you have too many good things that you're juggling, that can get too heavy. So sometimes success in and of itself, it can become overwhelming.
Yeah.
And, Jesus said, be careful that the cares of this life will drown out spiritual things. I'll testify, man. Sometimes good things can become the dominant focus. So sometimes if you don't, it's not so much an Achilles heel, but that you have self-awareness. And people who don't have self-awareness and self-knowledge, their Achilles heel brings them down. So it's getting to know God and getting to know yourself and realizing that, there's some stuff, some places and some things you can't do because you know what's inside of you. But you got all this success. You like Ben Simmons. Like, I got this 6-figure contract and I ain't got no jump shot. Why should I get a jump shot now? He was an all-star, averaging almost a triple-double without any skills.
Yeah.
Offensive skills.
Right.
I ain't got no weakness. I got the bag without doing this. So we saw him this week with the jump shot. No, when this contract is done, you're going to be a minimum player, just like Russell Westbrook.
Yeah.
He don't have that self-awareness and self-knowledge that says, I need to change, I need to improve, I need to get better.
So do you think it's the money that gets to people, or it's the attention?
It's
Or a mixture of both?
I mean, all due respect to LeBron James, but when he answers the phone, he says, it's the king. Or when he calls somebody, they pick up, he's like, it's the king. James Harden. Their lives are just like the offense, heliocentric. Everything revolves around them. When everything revolves around you and your profession and your career and your life, how failure just doesn't come to your mind. So your greatest strengths become your greatest weakness. So it's the money, yeah, but if you learn how to grind when things were bad, you can appreciate it when things get good because you know what it took to get there. And you don't take anything for granted.
I think it's balance, honestly. Like, you have to. It's almost better if you have a slower start.
Oh yeah.
So that as you move up, at least you should have a good foundation. Now, some people forget where they came from and forget their foundation or try to go somewhere else, and then that's one thing. But at least they still have in the back of their head, something to go back on.
And it's easier to remind them.
It's easier to remind them. But if it's the opposite, it's a little bit harder. So, I mean, confidence is not bad in and
Yeah,
of
oh,
itself.
no,
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
in
yeah,
certain
yeah. You gotta
spaces,
have
you
confidence.
need confidence,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But then on the flip side, if you become like an airhead and like the ego is there, it's just like that's where confidence becomes a negative. And so it's just like I think one of the hardest things for us as humans is literally the balancing act.
Yeah.
It's very hard, and that's why the tipping scales
It's
like type
hard.
of diagram, like just seeing that visual and seeing how hard it is to like actually balance it like right. It is hard, but it's not impossible.
No,
It's a practice, a lifelong
It
practice.
takes exactly. It takes active effort.
Yeah.
Continuously, not
Right.
just like for a little season.
Exactly.
look at Solomon.
Poor Solomon.
I'm like, if you don't have self-discipline, you can have all the skills and natural gifts in the head and competencies with your hands, but if you don't have self-discipline, you can lead a nation and lead businesses and corporations, but if you can't lead yourself,
Yeah.
That's a word.
1,000 concubines or 1,000 women? I'm like, why the excess?
As a
Why the excess?
It makes you think, just like the 1,000 bottles. Like, why the excess? There's a it's connected to the lack of self-knowledge. You have to go farther to get. You try to get the original high. The chemicals in your brain, whatever that original is. So you gotta go overboard, and then it comes to a place where. And I guess we'll talk about it with Diddy, why he's on suicide watch. Because if he's sober, you have agitation, you have withdrawal. You have to engage in pain to cover up your pain. So you have, like my brother, we'll talk about him undoubtedly, he would have to drink at the beginning of the day to get sober.
Wow.
Hold on.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
What kind of life is
Get
that?
sober.
So you have to go to a certain place, or you think you do, to try to get that original, and it ain't there. It's a mirage. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Remember that, because there's a point in the show where we're going to talk about how like the brain works, and it's a mirage. It doesn't exist. You need to hold on to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the cognitive dissonance that happens.
Yeah. Let me tell you, if you are not in the live yet, this is the opportunity and the time to invite people.
Definitely.
This season of The Walk has just been so different. Like we've attacked like some.
Heavy
if you hear it in the
topics.
intro, like no topics off limits.
Right.
I think this season, we needed a mental break after a little bit. We've touched some topics this season, and as we were thinking through, like, what should we talk about this month or for this episode, and all of a sudden I saw, was it on your page I saw it, or my cousin? It's one of the two.
I think I reposted something.
You reposted something, and while we were thinking about topics, I was like, why not this topic?
Yeah, exactly.
So what we're talking about is, again, a life worth living. And we're talking about the topic of suicide. And so September is National Suicide Prevention Month. And, this is not a topic that you hear a lot, especially in a church setting. But we can't be naive and think that this is not a thought that crosses people's minds, even in the church. Like, you can be a Christian and fill in all the blanks. Like whatever you, like anything that happens in the world, you can be a Christian and all these things happen, right? And so instead of taking the approach where we, like dodge and be like, oh, this is gonna be a difficult topic, how are we gonna talk about it? I hope you understand at least our heart and understanding that we want to be that safe place where we can at least have the conversations. And so if you are a person that's thinking about it, or if you know people, hopefully by the end of this, through the Spirit's help as well, that you come away with hope and knowing how to help someone as well. So at this church, I was trying to think of like, how do you set this up? So I'm going to start with, this is the walk happens here at Mount Zion in Kissimmee. And so one of our taglines, or our tagline, is really, "We love you and there's nothing you can do about it." And so when I think about that, and I'm thinking where it came from, it really has to come from a space of not just something that just sounds good, but it's really understanding, like, just like the saying of, even in the depths of hell, God's there, like, right?
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
just like, love isn't just love when it's easy, but it's in those places and spaces where when you need it most, when you feel the lack thereof, there's something, there's someone, there's a people, there's a group there. And so if that's what this church represents, so I think this is a very appropriate topic. So
Yeah.
we want to make sure that we destigmatize it even more. Not just in this month, but let this be a starting place for even this church of being a safe haven for the hopeless and those that need help. And so I believe CJ and Andre have some stats in here, so you can definitely share some of the stats, and then we're going to go into the definition and the conversation. But please
Dre, you want me to do this?
invite the people to this live. Like, share this and get them in here so we can have a conversation. We're looking at your comments as well, so continue to engage with this. Kiara's saying, loving this. Carolyn Williams, happy Sabbath, blessing MZ family. So keep the comments coming. Let's have a good dialogue.
Alrighty. So, guys, some interesting statistics to share. And these statistics are coming from the CDC and the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. So, for suicide, it's the 11th leading cause of death in the U.S. It is the third leading cause of death for ages between 15 to 24.
That is crazy.
Right?
Wow.
It's Gen Z.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Men die by suicide 3.85 times more than women.
That one shocked me.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah.
But it kind of semi makes sense.
It does make sense. Yeah.
I didn't think it would be that, like, 4 times more.
Yeah, almost 4 times more.
Men don't talk about things.
We don't.
Yeah, we don't.
And there's an immense pressure from even the responsibility standpoint. So
yeah.
I think losing a job, for example, is bad for both sexes, no matter what.
Right.
However, if how it's looked on, and we talked about this in past episodes. It's just like, if your wife or your girl loses her job, you'd be like, all right, babe, it's okay, you're gonna find something. Some women, if the guy loses a job and there happens to be an argument, take your broke behind out. Like that's just kind of like that's not all women. There's a lot of women that are supportive, but I think that men just have that pressure of like, we know that we're supposed to be providers and stuff like that. And so when you don't feel like you have a handle of things, that pressure is there.
Yeah, absolutely. Males make up 50% of the population, but nearly 80% of suicides.
Wow.
In 2022, rates were highest for adult ages for 85 plus years old. Suicide rates increased 37% between 2000 and 2018 and decreased 5% between 2018 and 2020. However, rates returned to their peak in 2022. So that was probably because of COVID.
Right.
So we're going to go over some definitions. So National Institute of Mental Health describes suicide as a death caused by self-directed injuries, behavior with intent to die as a result of the behavior. A suicide attempt is a non-fatal, self-directed, potentially injurious behavior with intent to die as a result of the behavior. A suicide attempt might not result in injury. Suicidal ideation refers to thinking about, considering, or planning suicide.
So working in the hospital, I would say when I first started working in the emergency department, one of the unfortunately common things people registered for was suicidal ideations. And
What do you mean, like on like the intake form? What do you mean?
so when they would come, they come through the emergency room, they go to the registration desk, and you have to say what you're here for. I'm here for chest pain, I'm here for that, and the other, right? And people will come in, and I've been there at the desk, and someone will come in, and they'll usually like whisper or something. They're just like,
That takes
I'm feeling
courage.
like
Yeah,
I want to
yeah,
hurt
yeah,
myself,
yeah,
or
yeah.
like I'm having suicidal ideations, or stuff like that. And when I saw like the first person come in, I'm like, okay, like I'm glad that they decided to come seek help. What I didn't expect is how common it is. That the fact that basically every hospital has a section of the emergency room that, like is for, it could be for people that just have to be monitored because of suicidal ideation. And so one of the things to really consider is just the magnitude of it. When you see it on the news, of course, it's heartbreaking for sure, but don't think that that's the only people that's committed suicide. That's what you've seen on the news. But there's so many people every single day.
And for most people, the access to a mental health evaluation is either jail or the emergency room. Like I have my therapist on my phone. I have a primary care physician.
Right.
But I mean, how many people are people?
Right.
Like, I chatted with my therapist this week and I wasn't feeling too hot. Some stuff was going on.
Yeah. Yeah,
a lot of times, and even if you have, then you get into insurance and how do you find a therapist? There's so many different ways now. But usually the emergency room or jail is where you get a mental health evaluation.
Right.
And usually if you have mental health issues, how do you come to the emergency room? If you come voluntarily, that's great. If you call 911, there's fear there.
Yeah.
We already know how that goes.
Right.
So that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
And even there, sometimes some counties, there's less follow-up because there's less follow-up by the people who bring you and by the people that assess you. And there's different reasons for that. But yeah, that's sad that the emergency room and usually jail is where people will get mental health evaluation. But that, to voluntarily do that takes a lot lot of courage.
Yeah, definitely
100%.
salute to people that do that. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
100%. Yeah, because like you were saying, especially in our community as Black people and even being Caribbean, mental health and all of that stuff, we can't even complain. Your parents, I said, oh, I'm too, nothing wrong with you. Go read the Bible. Right?
And that's why a lot of times when it comes to this topic, suicide, say the word, people think by talking about it, it'll bring it. By just like saying someone's name who died by suicide, it doesn't bring up likelihoods of other people. Like, no, you're just talking about the elephant in the room. We say you're a normal person having a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. And that can happen at any time, any day. It might be a trigger. So my son, he was peeing standing up this week. And out of nowhere, and I had what we call a trigger and a glimmer. It was both at the same time. So joy and pain. I started weeping, and I'm like, "Where is this coming from?" I was reminded of my grandpa. He would put his hand on the wall. That's how he peed. And I'm like, he doesn't need me.
And you started crying.
Man, and he was like, "Daddy, what's wrong?" I'm like, "Bro, I don't know." I was happy and sad, and then I was also thinking, because my mom passed when I was 2. I'm like, man, my mom didn't get to see me. Pee standing up. I just had all these rush of emotions. I was a normal person having a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. So next time I connect with my therapist, we're gonna talk about that. And what came up as a man, as a human, just seeing my son peeing standing up.
Right.
So sometimes joy and pain go together. And for people who aren't in touch with what makes them happy, what might not, emotions in general can get pushed down and pushed back, suppressed and repressed. And if some cultures are more prone to that, And when somebody dies by suicide, I'm like, now you want to talk about it? We could have been talking about it
before.
all along, where it's just a
Yeah.
normal part. Using the word depression and clinical depression aren't the same thing. Just because you have pain, it doesn't mean you're suicidal. Or talking about self-harm, it doesn't mean you're going to do something.
Right.
So normalizing conversations and emotional expression and talking about what's going on inside within families, within churches, within synagogues, within mosques, everywhere. Because I'm like, we're all dealing with heavy stuff.
Let me add something right there, right? Let's put a pin in what he just said, though. If we're normalizing it, again, emphasis on safe places and spaces. So if what CJ talked about is basically the reaction of, oh, if you feel like you're going to your parents, and then you're going to get a reaction of like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're crazy. Like, you know, go pray. Or like, you know, whatever it is. Like, you can't be dismissive. And same thing in the, like, you know, a church community environment. Like, if someone's coming to this space and place, like, realize, even if you feel like, you know, whatever it is, it might be like a miss on their point. Again, take it from a place of empathy. And like, it's just really just understanding this person is hurting. You might not understand the totality of the details.
Right.
So right now, what a person needs is for people to be there, not dismissive.
And religion doesn't cover up pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain, chemical imbalance. And when, you know, boys don't cry, toughen up, whatever. You know, I push it down and drink my pain away. Or if you listen to, I mean, I don't know this audience, if you listen to Jelly Roll, I was listening to both of his albums. Second one's better than the first one. And I'm like, I can't listen. It spoke to me. But I'm like, I can't listen to this too much. I'm like, I can't, because it's just going to bring up stuff. And I'm like, he has an outlet. And he has a therapist too.
Right.
And I'm like, what happens to people who don't have an outlet of art, who don't have an outlet of a therapist or a family or a doctor? We know what you're going to do. You're going to smoke it away, sleep it away, drink it away. Hopefully you put some sports and some exercise in there.
Right.
But
Yeah.
and then you're going to be 50 years old physically, but mentally you're going to be a 12-year-old individual.
Absolutely.
So there's some common causes of suicidal feelings. And so some of those include mental health problems, bullying, prejudice, or stigma relating to race, gender, disability, for example. I'm going to go back to some others. So different types of abuse include domestic, sexual, physical abuse, bereavement, the end of a relationship. That's actually really common. Long-term physical pain or illness, adjusting to a big change such as retirement or redundancy, money problems, housing problems, including homelessness, isolation or loneliness, being in prison, feeling inadequate or a failure, that's huge. Addiction or substance abuse, of course, if you feel like you're in a cycle where you're trying to drop something and you just can't. Pregnancy, childbirth, or postnatal depression, doubts about your sexual or gender identity, cultural pressure such as forced marriage, society's expectations, for example, to act a certain way or achieve certain things by a certain time, and other forms of trauma. And there's just so many. And this list is just crazy.
Keeps going.
The ones that stick out to me, bullying is one of the silliest ones to be on this list, because there could be things that are mental health. Maybe you can't help someone on the inside, right?
Right.
But what you do have control over is how you treat someone.
Exactly.
And to see that bullying could be on the list of what makes someone even consider this is just like ridiculous. And so one of the things I thought about when I read that is, would you say the same things to this person if you knew they were suicidal? And so just because you don't know that they are, you probably shouldn't say it anyway, because you don't know what people are going through.
You don't. You see the stories of people, kids, young adults. They be having good stuff going on in their life. And when I see the stories of the kids and you hear the stories of bullying, and I'm like,
Crazy.
as a father,
Mm.
you so many things you have so many things that go on in your mind. But yeah, bullying, I mean, social acceptance from someone whose acceptance doesn't really matter
Right.
ultimately.
Right. Right.
But for someone, when you're rejected or shunned or not accepted, or where if you feel like you don't belong
Mm-hmm.
in a place and it's not going to get better and you don't have no outlet, it's like Charlie Brown. I know I'm dating myself, but Charlie Brown had a thing where a dark cloud and it was raining on him,
Yeah.
and it was sunny everywhere else.
Outside, yeah.
And when it's just raining, bro,
Mhm.
for if it's biochemical or whatever those
Yeah.
other mitigating factors might be.
And sometimes it's not even like, an idea is like, man, for example, I think all these things go together. God, I pray that this rain cloud goes away from Joe. But sometimes it could look like, hey, Joe, I noticed it was raining around you. Here, like, I'm going to come with you with an umbrella. Let's go through this together. Like I'm going to make sure you're shielded a little bit from the rain. And that's some of the examples of what these things can look like. It's not anything isolated by itself. It's not one solution. It's like multiple things that could be done.
That's
Definitely. And to even tap in more into it, like the bully, for example, why are they bullying that person?
Yeah, you got to look at both sides.
Exactly. And it's probably because they might be being
they're
neglected at
repeating
home.
behavior they're receiving
Exactly.
at home.
You know what I'm saying? They could be having mental struggles or challenges.
With children, again, usually Oprah Winfrey, I think she said it. I think she got a book on it. It's with children, with bullies. It's like, it's not why are you doing that? What happened to you?
Exactly.
What seed was planted in you? What soil are you in that's tainting you? That's defiling you? That's because, again, children are doing what they're receiving.
Exactly.
And if it's trauma and abuse, they're going to act out.
Exactly.
And of course, that doesn't change through puberty.
Right.
You act out behaviorally what you're thinking and what you're feeling. So that's serious.
One I left off on here because it's interesting, especially in our community, is spiritual trauma. And I'm not talking about church hurt specifically. I'm talking about spiritual trauma. How about those that feel like they prayed to God and He's not answering? What about those that feel like they've devoted a lot of their life to like what they feel like He's asking of them, and like they're just not getting a breakthrough. They're not understanding. They're like, when's my break? Like I see things happening for other people. Like why not me? And so spiritual trauma is a huge one for the Christian community.
That's like Elijah. That's basically what happened to him. You know, he dedicated his whole life, thought things were going one way, and then he hears that all his work has like been in vain. All the prophets are dead.
In one day.
He's like, my gosh, like, and he was distraught. And were it not for God's intervention, like, oh, what up? Slow down there, buddy. It's not that bad. Don't worry.
Well, the first thing God told him to do is go take a nap and then get something to eat.
True.
God didn't even address his depression for like 40 days. So a lot of times the emotional highs and lows that are a part of being human and a part of the spiritual walk, we don't want to acknowledge that because I grew up in the Pentecostal church and a lot of cardio.
Trust me.
Praises.
I believe it.
I've had my aunt leave the hospital and we go to prayer meetings and she testifying with her walker, leave her walker, running around the church against doctor's orders. And I'm like, but these false expectations sometimes that we put on God that because I do X, Y, and Z, this ain't gonna happen. This isn't gonna happen to me. And I'm like, bro, this is 2024. Why do we keep telling that lie? We have pastors that die by suicide. We have pastors' kids that die by suicide. I'm like, or it doesn't matter the religion, race, culture, country. I'm like, when we don't have when we don't normalize the human experience and the human condition,
Yeah.
we spiritualize what should be like, no, that's just normal. You're gonna fail. That's a part
You're
of
gonna
growing.
feel down.
You're gonna,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you're gonna. Depression is a part of the human emotional range.
Yeah.
Elijah didn't have that self knowledge. Bro was like, just end it.
Yeah.
God's like, go take a nap, man. Just,
Right.
get something to eat. Matter of fact, God cooked it.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, where you get that food from? Got perfect temperature,
Ready
right
for
where he
him.
was sleeping. So sometimes the answer to emotional wellness, yes, it's mental health professional. Yes, it's medication, maybe supplements. There's mood supplements, but sleep and nutrition. That ain't spiritual. That's just regular stuff.
Right.
That contributes to brain health.
Yeah.
And I guess what goes along with that is that's also a cycle, because it's just like, well, maybe because I can't sleep or I can't eat because of what I'm going through, right? And it's just like, it's a really hard tug of war in a sense. But I think one thing to think about, even with this topic, is you can have a realization of yourself, and some people that deal with this blame themselves for certain things. We all make mistakes, and we all do things maybe that we shouldn't have done. However, you can't just really focus on blaming yourself for everything, right? And I think that's one of the major parts, like, I did this to me, all that type of stuff. It might be the reality. However, what do we do from here?
There's one therapist told me, you have ABC: your affect, your feelings, your behavior, and your cognition, your thoughts. And sometimes because of improper or imbalanced brain chemistry, you have a script that you're telling yourself, these irrational thoughts. So the therapy gives you another script. The Bible, you have negative spiritual coping and positive spiritual coping. When you read that, you're made in the image of God. God's thoughts for you were before you were born. God chose to adopt you before the creation of the world. He knows everything about you. The good, the bad, the ugly, the darkness, the light. Those are new scripts. So that's why I like some of the new worship songs. I'm a friend of God. I'm not forgotten. Jehovah Jireh. There's new scripts in new language. Hymns are good scripts in traditional language, and those are helpful too. All of it is helpful. It's just new scripts. The Bible, we're repeating what God has said about us, he said to us, and then the Spirit comes, and you have therapy, and you have medicine, and you have exercise, and you have a social support, and it's all of it working together. Day by day, because some days are higher than others.
Right. No, that's for sure. For sure. Overlooked examples, things to think about. So we talked about a little bit. Having possessions doesn't make things better necessarily. So
it's a house of cards.
So it's just like, you can have the wealth and still feel empty. And one of these actually said, how is it that a paraplegic could enjoy life, but someone with all their limbs not? And it's really comes down to perspective and like being able to shift your perspective. And and I was like, that's actually true, because when you think of some TED Talks and different conversations you see on YouTube, for example, there are brave people out there, missing limbs, deaf, blind, that are living a life of where you can almost not even tell that
that there's something
there's something wrong. Like, it's just like they seem to have such a peace about their situation. They're able to like truly live. And it's just like, okay, well, there's actually something where we on the outside see something where it's just like, man, if that was me, I'd be depressed. But there's something different there, right? And so I think one of the things to understand is, even if you don't have you know, everything you want right now. You're not where you think you should be. Remember those societal standards. There's nothing that says that once you get there, your problems go away. And so it's like really understanding of like, okay, with where I'm at right now, what do I need to actually have shift in my life? And a lot of it is, like you said, it's retraining your brain because your brain will lie to you.
For sure.
And I think there's definitely scripture that talks about heart and your mind. Those are like two places where it can dictate the rest of your life. And if that's not correct, you could be on a road for destruction.
And you know, one of the things is you can have the promises of God and have the positive scripts. My vice principal in second grade used to hold up a mirror and say, you know, I'm Joe, I like myself. You know, that's good. You need positive self-talk and positive God talk. But some people, just their brain chemistry, they can't all the time. So sometimes there are some mental illnesses and some brain chemistries can't be fixed. Sometimes there's just gonna be parts of the psyche and the personality that might not be fixed.
Right.
So or not, that's the wrong word. Might not be integrated.
Right.
Put together. Because they're not broken.
Right.
Some things are, but sometimes you're just gonna have this dark thoughts.
Yeah, and with that, would you say, well, of course you would say it's okay to seek help and kind of get medication for that.
Well, you know, normalizing it. I'm always saying I'm a normal person having a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. Right. The fact that I was crying when my son was achieving a milestone, I'm like, where'd that come from?
Right.
So I think understanding how emotions work, you know, joy and pain go together. And I'm happy for him, while at the same time there's a part of me that's very sad. Yeah. At the same time, I'm like, okay, we're good. Let's go get some popsicles. But not, and sometimes when you get stuck in it, that's a part. And some personalities and some temperaments are in that stuck place. That's this. So, you know, having a friend, social media, music, to get a little bit off, because people who engage in self-harmful behavior or attempt suicide, a lot of times it's not, they don't want all the pain to stop. They want some of the pain to stop.
At least a little bit of it. Yeah.
And no one can live in pain 24/7.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So that's where drugs come in, legal or illegal.
Right.
That's where alcohol comes in. That's where harmful behavior think about Michael Jackson. He just wanted sleep.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? Whitney Houston. So sometimes the needs are legitimate. The biochemistry needs are legitimate, but sometimes some wires are off and it's just not going to come together. And you want some relief. You're like, I can live with a little bit of heaviness. I'm like, man, that's a rough place to be.
One of my friends asked, do you think that this is true due to social media and the rise of woke culture?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Also, is it possible that we have brought too much awareness to this and created a problem that wasn't much there before? Playing devil's advocate.
Everybody is diagnosing themselves with.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I'm like, when we talk about churches being safe spaces, if you're going to do that, you got to have a referral for a therapist in the community. As a pastor, you cannot be a pastor and a counselor, even if you're a pastor and a therapist. You can't have the same office for the people. You can't. You can't do it. And as a chaplain, I'll listen to you, support you, empathize with you, but I'm going to refer you. I'm not, no.
Right.
We do mental health first aid, and I might even be your grief counselor, but if you start talking about that, I'm going to stay with you and either get an umbrella to shield the rain or sit down with you in the rain.
Right.
And we're going to get help.
Absolutely. And yeah, to touch on social media is not a real place, guys. Let's put that out there on the air.
Filters.
Right. Everything you see on there is fake. About what I would say a good 75% of probably what you see on social media isn't real. So don't get caught up in the lifestyle of what people are presenting. Those
Good
cars are
entertainment at best.
right.
But
it's
you
good
have to
entertainment.
be careful of how you entertain yourself.
Yes.
Oh, most definitely.
So
It can be very
Absolutely.
tough. When you judge your life by other people's filters and highlights,
but sometimes you don't actually think you're doing that. It happens
it's
subtly. It's just like you don't think like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna hop on social media so I can compare my life to others.
Yeah,
But it's just like it
something just
happens because that's why there's Bible that says like you really have to be careful what comes in because you really don't know. You did not create yourself. You don't know how it's affecting your brain. So it's just like from the jump, you really have to be careful about what you intake or even how much. Like it's like you cannot have a dead period without picking up your phone and jumping on social media, even though you were on there 5 minutes ago.
Right.
Not that much has changed. You
Yeah.
know?
And you don't realize it until you try to stop.
And then now your phone tells you. I have to disable that.
Exactly.
It tells you
You've been on there
how
too
many
long.
hours
How many
you've been
hours
there.
you allocated per app? Yeah.
And you know, when I grew up, we were outside.
Yeah.
I think I first got a phone, maybe that was mine that I paid for about less than 20 years ago. I couldn't imagine being 6 and 7 years old with a smartphone. And I'm like, I used to post everything, what I'm eating, where I'm going. I'm like, nah. The last 10 years, people are like, oh, you were there. I'm like, yeah, I didn't. I'm like, no. I want to experience life and not document life. And it's so hard. It's so hard. But social media is important at the same time.
Yeah.
So sometimes people want to disengage from social connections.
Yeah.
But there's research, digital psychologists and digital sociologists look at people that engage in meaningful social media engagement. Sometimes the withdrawal, you're like, man, I haven't seen you in a minute. That's it. That could be a risk factor for, okay, something else is going on.
Yeah.
You post every morning at 9 o'clock.
Right. Today
You was walking 30 days straight, and now it's been a week.
Right.
Something ain't right.
Something's going on. Exactly.
That's true.
Substances. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Okay.
Substance use is a poor coping skill. Although substances, as well as any addiction, work, exercise, food, productivity, control, power, attention, bring some acute relief or escape, they interfere with our development of healthy coping skills to deal with what life brings us. Our addictions also bring on consequences that isolate us even more and create a bigger hole that seems impossible to get out of. This is where I'll dig into, I'd say, the spiritual realm a little bit, because I think with this, you have to think about, if the devil sees that you're in a hole, he's going to be like, he's not going to be satisfied with, oh, you're in a hole, let me move on to the next one. He's like, how deep can I make this hole for you so that there is literally
there's no way you can get out, right?
And this is really where you have to like think through as much as possible, like harness it, like, God definitely helped me to get some clarity, but even for yourself, like, do these things of just like, I know what I'm feeling, I know what I'm going through, even though this may seem like it's making it feel better, really have a conversation of, is it actually, like, what is this doing for my future and the hope I have for a future? It's like a really delicate type of question to be able to ask yourself. But one thing pretty much sure is, even though some things feel good and feel like an escape, your goal, especially in this state, is not for anything temporary, usually. And so that's a really, what can you say to that? It's just like, well, if I found something, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, or whether it's like, you know, I'm always working, I'm always like, you know, doing whatever it is, this is my escape. But it's not necessarily ultimately beneficial for me. Like what?
deal with reality and engage with reality. What's real? Sometimes religion, people replace one addiction with another. Athletes replace one thing with another. You know, what is authentic living? Drugs is not authentic living, but sometimes people, how you're introduced to it. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, the policeman would come to the school and would have the briefcase of drugs and would go through the different drugs and would say no to drugs. So I remember somebody walked up to me and was like, you want this pill? I knew the person, he was a friend of my brother, and I'm like, no. Why no.
Taking all the drugs.
But on the flip side, I grew up in the hood and I was smoking and drinking. I would drink beer with my mom, and then she would give me the cigarettes to go to the kitchen to light up, and I'm puffing on the way back.
Wow.
So I'm like, we got that. So you have some things that are illicit and harmful, but they're still socially acceptable in certain subcultures.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, we not doing heroin, but you know, we lighten up the blunt.
Right.
You know, I'm not doing bourbon or whiskey, but I got, you know, some hard lemonade, mango that's sweet.
Some Mike's hard.
I'm like, I ain't got a blunt, but my mom and my aunts, they vape, and I got introduced to it. So I'm like, sometimes, again, they're legitimate needs, but they're being met in illegitimate ways. And if you're in a place of pain and somebody who's also in a place of pain said this is going to help you or make you feel better for a brief period, and they might have power over you, influence over you. You look at DMX. He was 14 giving cocaine by, I think it was his uncle. It was somebody significant in his life. 14.
Wow.
And got hooked from that day and ultimately died from that. So I'm like, you can be, sometimes there's no gateway drug. Sometimes there's no gateway things. Sometimes it's just all
Right
what it
there,
is,
yeah.
and you stuck. And getting out of that, it's like when you got a breakdown on the car with a car. You can't push the car, you can't drive the car, you need a tow truck to come and pull you away. You need something bigger than you and outside of you to come help you.
Yeah, that's
So
good.
sometimes you can't say I need help, your body says it. So if you can go to the emergency room voluntarily, that's great. Sometimes it's going to be involuntarily, and hopefully you're alive.
Yeah.
And hopefully we say safe and sane. If you're not sane, let's be safe. If you can't be safe, you know, let's say a prayer for mercy. And sometimes that's just people trying to cope day by day. But you got to come to the place where you're like, I want something different. I don't know what my problem is, but I want something different, and I don't want to do this anymore. And it might not be a cognitive thing. Sometimes it's an emotional cry.
Yeah.
There was a sermon that our pastor preached, and I always remember the title because it really stood out to me. The title was "I Won't Stay Here," and it was about the lepers outside of Israel when they were being besieged by Syria. And basically the point that he was saying is, you know, these lepers had nothing left to lose. You know, they're ostracized. They, you know, they're got this terrible condition. No one in the city got food. They definitely don't got food. And they came to the decision like, all right, you know, life sucks. Like, like we gonna die, like whatever. But I'm not gonna die here. I'm at least gonna try. Like, let's walk over there and see what's over there. They might kill us. All right, whatever. But like, come to that point where you're like, I'm not gonna die here.
And sometimes that's before. So I had my wife and I, we had a miscarriage. And I was having suicidal thoughts. I was thinking my wife would be better off if I wasn't here. I got insurance. She gonna be set. I would cry in my sleep.
Wow.
I didn't even know that was in my nightmares on Christmas. So weeks had went by, and she was like, we got to see somebody. And my body was telling me
Yeah.
that it was my grief, that you're not acknowledging this, you're not dealing with this, you're just going on. And I was like, there were nights where I would just be like, God, I don't want to wake up in the morning.
Wow.
But I woke up and I survived. I'm like, I don't want to live like this anymore.
Mhm.
So I'm like, if I'm gonna go to this therapist, I'm like, I ain't gonna go out like this. And so going into that first therapy session was so hard, but I'm like, it's better to be uncomfortable with this person who gonna help me than me suffering in silence. Because I'm like, if I don't, I'm gonna lose my life, and I'm gonna lose her.
Mm.
I'm like, because I kept waking up.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to wake up, but I'm like, I keep waking up.
Mhm.
What am I gonna do with the day?
Wow.
Deep. Deep.
That's,
Deep.
and I think that's the reality that
Man,
a lot of people
Yeah.
probably do face. It's just like, how can I make this pain go away?
Yeah.
And it's just like, all right, God, I try praying to you. And then it's just like, all right, if you're not going to answer my prayer, at least like, let me just peacefully go, And it's just like, but you're like, no, but I kept waking up. And so let me just ask you this question on the spot, right? Looking at where you were then and where you are here today, are you happy that he kept waking you up?
I was going to preach in Tampa, and I was 2-hour drive, and I'm like, man, I'm glad I woke up this morning. So you'll see some memes that people post, I'm glad you're here today. Like, that's a serious thing. I have some classmates that have some real health issues, and when they post, I'm glad I'm awake today, everybody going and giving them affirmation and support, because every day for them is a battle. Showing up when the sun, for me, I love sunrises now that I'm on the East Coast. I love sunrises. For some people, that's dread because they have to deal with the reality of what's going to happen. I was in a space where sleeping was better, and then when sleeping got painful, so now I'm like, man, well, our son is usually the thing that wakes us up. I want to wake up earlier before him, but sometimes we're up at night. But no, I thank God every day that I get to be his father. I get to be, he gets to be my son. I'm married. It's a miracle, right?
Yeah.
But there's sometimes it's simple things. I'm like, I woke up today, God, thank you. And I have gratitude. Because again, the people that survive the night, like, I'm not dead. What am I gonna do? So sometimes just affirming your humanity and being conscious, you're like, man, I'm in my right mind. I ain't got dementia. I ain't got no brain injury. I can move my fingers. I'm in a bed. I have an apartment. I have a house.
Right.
I have a job. I have a car. So sometimes it's practicing that self-gratitude.
Attitude of gratitude.
Because you see people with, just different maladies. And you're like, man, I woke up and I know who I am. I know where I am. There's many things, not to just be thankful up here, but it gives you a gratitude there.
Yeah, and there's like, I don't know if it's like a saying or a quote, and it's like, your worst day could be someone's best day they ever had.
True.
So we have to be grateful for the things that we do possess. Like you said, we can walk, we can talk, we can hear, we can see, like all these things that we take for granted because we have them. And like we were touching on earlier, some people, they go through life and they might have a disability, and it's like that disability doesn't even change what they have, so it's just all about being grateful for what you do have. So they could be saying, okay, I can't hear, but at least I can see, or I can't see, but at least I can hear, so it is just something to be grateful for the position that we're in.
when somebody comes into Advent Health, they get a spiritual screening. Is there somebody who loves you? Do you have what brings you joy? What brings you peace? Joy, peace, and love. Sound like an old Motown record. But everybody gets asked that. And there's a whole department dedicated to that outside of the chaplains. Sometimes we get those referrals. We see the question, we see the answers when we see the patients. So I'm like, a lot of people, that first question is no.
Well, and remind me, what's the first question?
Is there someone in your life? Is there someone that loves you or something like that?
Wow.
And I'm like,
Wow.
And that's actually one of these, they talk about Robin Williams and saying that he grew up shy, lonely, and afraid of his father. He stated that he had an acute fear of abandonment and love me syndrome. And the definition is, I will do whatever it takes for you to love me, or better, I will suppress who I am so you will love me.
that's fitting in, not belonging.
Right. Yeah.
And emotionally, the mental health therapist and psychologist can explain it better. But as a kid, if you're not able to belong, that's what a family is supposed to be, the first place where you belong, and be your true self in that space. Emotionally, you start to get repressed. So like for me, I graduated from college at 27 from Oakwood, but emotionally I was probably 15. And thank God I ain't have no record, I ain't had no kids, and I wasn't addicted to nothing. But emotionally, I was a teenager. And I think of my son, I'm like his script. When he was a baby, he loved looking at himself in the mirror. I'm like, I'm glad he knows he looks good. Takes after his mother. But I'm like, I like that Kurt Franklin's son. I like me. That's important. It starts
with you.
It starts young and it starts with you. So unconditional, the psychologists call it unconditional positive regard. That starts when you're a baby. And that's why it's important to have that supportive environment. And when that's not there, the church can be a space, the school, the spaces that are supposed to be safe and nurturing to the seed that's inside the child are toxic places. So if the family's not going to be safe, the school ain't going to be safe, the church ain't going to be safe, the government ain't going to be safe. Well, we're safe.
We're safe.
And so I would add to that, and that's why I would say we definitely cannot remove God from the equation. I think that's where sometimes it could be confusing, because I know we've gone through phases where it's been all like, just pray about it, you know? And it's just like, I think in some of our conversations, it could feel like we're removing it, and that's, I don't think that's the key, but it's like, what, right? And so one thing I do, you know, I see on social media is like talking about our generation really, and it's just like, oh, we can't be today's parents. And it's like, but just the things that they allow their kids to do or what they do with their kids. But one thing I think some of this generation has right is I see them showing their kids doing positive affirmations with each other. It's beautiful to see like a mom telling her daughter, say like, I'm beautiful, I'm wonderful, and telling a son like, you know, I'm smart, I'm handsome, like, you know, and stuff like that. And even repeating what God says about you, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And even understanding from a science perspective, you won the race. Like understand, like
millions.
God, right? Millions, right? Like God, like you said, Chaplain, it's like God knew you before you were even formed and here, and He decided that you had to be the one that was here. So you, even in and of that, understanding that how God sees you and how important you are to that you had to be here, and that even when you wanted to say like, God, don't wake me up tomorrow, and He woke you up, like there's a reason. And so like shifting that perspective into like, God, but like why? Like help me understand the why. And I guarantee you, if you can get into that space of like not allowing the devil, not allowing your brain
It's
to play
hard,
these
yeah.
gymnastics and tricks on you, you're going to discover, like, man, everything I was thinking a year, 5 years, 10 years ago,
Yeah.
like, I didn't enjoy that I had to go through it,
Mm-hmm.
but now I finally understand, like, it does and it can actually get better.
Yeah.
And I think in the Gospel of John, it says in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And it paints the picture that God and Jesus was face to face.
Yeah.
So when I wake up in the morning, that's what I think of me and God.
Face
That God
to
is
face.
right.
Yeah.
The way my son is
He's
in my
like-
face,
Waiting for you
he'd
to
be
wake
like,
up.
wake up, Daddy, wake up. And he's
Spiritual
right
imagery.
there. And I'm like, I just see God right there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I woke up because God likes my company.
Wow.
He likes my existence. I don't have
Yeah.
to do anything. It's not about my productivity,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
efficiency. I'm here
Wow.
another day,
Yeah.
and we get to go on this adventure. We might not be productive, but we're here. We're gonna do something today. Now let's go sit on the potty with the boy. So
That's
that
jokes.
simplicity of existence, that I'm loved by God, and that I'm awake every day. God is right there. Make those affirmations annoying.
Right.
My son is 3.5, man. It gets ridiculous. And we're sincere about it. Well, most of the time. You wrote the same word you wrote 8 times yesterday. Great job. He's like, yay, we did it. He says, we did it. And I'm like, it's the same word. But now the words are getting bigger.
Yeah.
Now they're Spanish words.
Okay.
He got the affirmation
It's
on
no
cat
and no.
and bat. Now the brother's writing elephant and camouflage. I'm like,
Okay.
I'm like, first of all, we ain't got the letters to spell camouflage. And my wife is like, no, he needs to know the process. So he's sounding out
Right.
the letters. And I'm like, it's too advanced for him. It's just like,
Yeah.
nah, it's not.
But you said something actually really good, and I think that's why the Bible talks about being like a child so much,
Oh, yeah.
right? Like, do you understand? Like, yeah, if you never said to your child, like, and while they were trying to stand, like, oh, good job, like maybe they would have still eventually walked. But do you know what that does to a child to be
Yeah.
like, good job, like you're so close, like having that type of like energy.
The affirmation, yeah.
Really does help. So if that can help a child that really doesn't even understand the words like that, can't even spell what you're saying, if that can have the effect on a child, imagine how having that in your own life can change the direction of your life.
It's better to not know God than have a false view of God and to have the wrong view of
That's
God.
true.
Wow.
That's very true.
There you go.
If you don't
Very
have the knowledge that God dances when you pay him attention, he throws a party when you desire to come home.
Yeah.
If we don't have that idea, God gets up off the throne and crip walks or whatever dance he does when you pay him attention.
Yeah.
Right.
So that means that God dances more than we do.
Sure does.
And see how
He
important
parties
you are,
more than we do.
like the God of the universe.
Right.
So the people that want to demonize emotional expression and joy and celebration,
Right.
they don't know God.
Wow.
Not the right one.
Right. So I was gonna say, do you think people have the right
He
interpretation?
doesn't crip off the
People have the right perception of God.
No.
So, we might think of God of, well, he's the holiest of holies, right? But some people don't think
God has like a sense of humor or anything like that, and if we come to him in prayer, it has to be like, oh
Well, that's
God,
why Jesus came to humanize God's deity.
right?
So we try to deify his humanity. Jesus did the opposite.
Wow.
Jesus did the opposite.
Wow.
That's good.
Well, that ain't mine. That's Jason O'Rourke. That's
Oh,
Jason
that's our
O'Rourke.
guy. Yeah.
Jason O'Rourke.
Chaplain Jason. Yeah.
So that's why I like The Chosen so much,
Mm.
because I'm like, you see
immediately what I thought
Jesus.
of.
I gotta watch it.
The brother was
my
pitching a
God.
tent
Yeah.
and was making a fire, and I'm like, this brother. I'm like, he's doing what I do. I'm like, he's washing dishes. He got sore feet. He needs his mother to wipe his face. Jesus is divinity wrapped in humanity.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm like, Jesus instigated people. Like when I see that, and I'm like, man, we try to mystify, and there is a otherness to God, and
Right.
there is
For
that,
sure. For sure.
and that's a part of it. But it's like everything that we see in Jesus, he's trying to put in a picture form of who God is like,
Right.
and what and how he's always been. So Jesus is the one who said, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son." God didn't send his Son into the world to condemn the world. So when I think about my brother and his dying by suicide, and I was thinking, he was in that space. He didn't know and feel how God thinks and feels about him. Whatever was in his mind, in his heart, in his soul, in his spirit, that was blocking that light. Of course, we'll always have guilt about that. But I'm like, he didn't know and feel, or he didn't know God. He didn't know, what they say, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He didn't know and feel. So we have a lot of knowledge about God, but we don't know God.
Right.
And religion can be an excuse. The woman at the well, Jesus was like, if you knew the gift of God and who's talking to you, you got this thirst inside of you. She started talking about the well and started talking about worship. Jesus is like, do you know I'm right here? Everything you've been praying for, crying for. She started talking about worship and Samaria and racism. She was emotionally constipated by her religion and what she knew about God.
But this is the thing, right? Don't try to take God away from your problems, because like it goes back to Eden, running away from God when you should be running towards him. But even with the woman at the well, like he brought it up that how many people have you slept with, right? All that type of stuff. That's probably something that she would have kept, like, we'd rather not talk about this. We can talk about. But he's just like, no, like we can go there. I'm going to show you that I love all of you. So it's just like, even if you're having that depression, that anxiety, like all these type of these thoughts, like God says, I love that you. And that's the one I can help bring. But when we're honest, then I can work with.
And he gonna give you that water now. Not after you go do this, that now.
So the first chaplain, Anton Boyson, was like 100 years ago. And his book is on emotion and spiritual experiences and whatnot. So he was a resident in a psych ward. And the chaplain for like off and on for like 20 years. The doctors weren't having conversations with their patients 100 years ago. So he started talking to the patients about their existential and emotional and spiritual issues, and was like the father of chaplaincy. He was a resident in the psych ward.
Wow.
So it's not, and that's what my sermon is about tomorrow, ironically, it's not that God is over here. God is in the middle. God, you said if you make your bed in hell, God is right there in hell with you.
So what are we going to do?
And that's really a part of the issue.
Yeah.
God has been hounding you and chasing you. Like, how do you become more conscious and aware of that? He's going to annoy you until you, like, I love you, Negro. I love you. Oh, you can't think it. I'm going to show you. Here's some people that are compassionate and patient, that says, I know everything about you, and I love you not in spite of what I know, but with everything that I know. And you can come to my cookout. You might be manic, but like you're gonna have to be on your meds. You might be coming from a bender, but I'm like, we're gonna go to the clinic. Having people that embody God's character, it's better for people to stay away. I'm trying to curb my words because I see it and have experienced it, and we had it in our community in Puerto Rico. A pastor's son, a prominent pastor's son, 25 years old, died by suicide a couple weeks ago. And the young adults were saying, this is a wake-up call
Right.
to the SDH. I'm like, these wake-up calls have been here.
Right.
The pastor's son?
Yeah.
I'm like, we're human beings, man.
Right.
Religion doesn't shield us from that. So you can believe that God loves you and still believe that, man, my life sucks and I suck. God, look, I got all these combobulated feelings and thoughts and emotions.
Yeah.
I think I wanted you to talk about the fact versus fiction part.
Oh,
But one thing when you said about not only just hymns, but like the newer worship songs that have a different language, when you said a key line of, you said something that made me think of this song. And I think a problem is that even when we come into this space of worship, in whether in church or on our own, like we're not really truly understanding and believing these songs. Because like you said something, I'm like, literally the words of Holy Spirit, you're welcome here says, let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness, right? And it's like, you could think of like Holy Spirit, you're welcome here as the space, but it's just like, no, in here. And like, I want to be able to feel your presence. I want to experience your goodness. Our heart is longing for you. Like, that's what, it's like a cry. But it's just like, when it just becomes like a thing that's just like, I think God's the right thing to do, and just becomes like that mundane experience, it doesn't really work the way that it should, even in piercing those hard places. And so
we're scared to give God our darkness. We think we have to get good before we get God.
Exactly.
I know that's a whole preacher cliche, but I got to clean. So you go into the dentist, so you got to brush your teeth 4 times a day for a week before. They know.
You trying to floss the night before for the first time in 6 months?
And they don't put you on blast for it.
We're not fooled at all.
When I went to do my annual physical, and I try to lift weights every day, but man, those 2 weeks I was hitting it. The blood ain't gonna lie. The blood work ain't gonna lie a year of what you've been doing. Of course, now I've been exercising for a year, so I'm like, certain things were off. I'm like, the doctor was like, you gained some things, but let's deal with this over here. He accepted me, but I'm like, and he's like, I was like, I'm vegetarian. He was like, what kind of vegetarian are you? I was like,
you asking the wrong questions.
He asking the right questions.
He's like, are you a good vegetarian? I'm like, not after 8. Before 8 p.m. But I'm like, my son goes to bed at 8. So I'm like, okay, I gotta accept myself. Like, I want to do something better. Why am I eating past 8 o'clock? What's going on? What's really going on? What grief didn't I talk about? When our classmates are dying and patients are dying, I'm like, okay, I need to have better. But it starts with self-acceptance and acceptance from another person. But we're afraid. I was at a church before I came here to Florida, at this big prominent white church, and the sermon was halfway decent. I don't really remember. You know, everybody want to shake your hand, blah, blah, blah. You're a new person. This dude came in church with a fitted hat, a white t-shirt, denim jeans, and some Timberlands, and he's white. And he ain't take his hat off in the church. You know, everybody's like this. This is a church I wear a tie to.
Yeah.
So the elder's daughter comes up to me and she's like, oh, he loved your sermon. I'm like, oh, thank you. Everybody says that, yeah. He just came from jail. She was late because she was at county jail bailing him out. And he's like, let me go to church.
Oh, wow.
I was judging him. I was texting my friends at my home church. I'm like, this dude just came into this church, this bougie church, with his white t-shirt and fitted hat on. The brother came from jail.
Wow.
He's like, I'm going to give God the real me, not the person I pretend to be.
Wow.
Either you accept it or you don't. But of course, God says, whoever comes to me, I'll never drive you away. I'm pulling you.
Yeah.
Come with your good and bad.
Absolutely.
Come smelling like the pig pen. And he came smelling
Man.
like the pig pen.
Mm-hmm.
And the preacher,
Mm.
all of us,
Wow.
Yeah.
was judging him.
Wow.
It takes courage. And it was a Saturday, so you know what was going on the night before. You get arrested on Friday. You know how he was turning up. And his girlfriend, who's the daughter of the first elder,
Wow.
brought him to church. So the church was a safe place.
Yeah.
So a church can be a safe place and you still have judgments. We all have judgments. Let's just be honest about it.
Yeah.
But I was like, man, that's what's up. I want to be a worshiper like that. 25 years, I'm still trying to get there.
Definitely.
All right.
So we're gonna do the fact or fiction one. All right.
Yeah.
So, fact or fiction. If I'm struggling with a mental health issue, that means that my faith is weak, and my relationship with God is weak.
That's fiction.
No, but for real,
You
a
brought
lot,
up Elijah.
a lot of Christians have this mentality that you just need to get stronger spiritually, and then your issues are you're good. You know,
No.
you could bring it to God; it'll be all right. Can you accept help from a non-Christian professional?
Of course.
But what if their advice isn't biblical?
You know, if faith is important to you as a like my therapist we talk about the Bible and Jesus. I'm a preacher. Faith is important to me.
Yeah.
So theological reflection is important.
Yeah.
But if a Christian therapist imposes their faith, that's unethical. But if faith is important to you, then you need to access what's going to be positive and helpful for the client, for that person. So some people, they want a Christian therapist, and that's fine. Some people, culture is more important.
Yeah.
But as a mental health professional, that's more, using evidence-based practices and interventions is more important than your faith, or just as important as your spiritual beliefs. Now, ultimately, God and mental health go together. And I wouldn't divorce, we're mind, body, spirit. I wouldn't divorce that. Some people do. You have to start where they are.
Yeah.
So some people, if that therapist isn't safe and they're religious, find somebody who's safe.
Right.
And again, because someone's religious, it does not mean they're safe.
Yeah.
And because a pastor took a counseling class, they're not a therapist. They're not. You took one class. You're not a mental health professional. Refer.
Yeah, I think it's very important to touch on that as well. So when I first started going to therapy was in 2017, right before I got out of the military, right? So in the military, so they just provide one for you, right? You didn't really have a choice. So they gave me this older, white lady. And she was a therapist for several years, probably before I was even born. Right. And it's not like she didn't know how to do her job. I just couldn't connect with her on a deeper level because one, she wasn't spiritual. Two, she couldn't really understand anything I was going through, and, different culture, different everything. So whenever I got out and now I can, select the criteria of what I want in a therapist, I needed I needed my therapist to be Black, spiritual, Christian, of course. Hey, if you're SDA, cool, perfect, and also Caribbean as well, because there's certain things that we kind of go through that, they can relate to and understand.
Your upbringing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they can better be able to tell you or understand or point you in the right direction. Because if I were to tell that the lady in the military about certain things I go through, she probably wouldn't understand, or probably she might be able to point me in the right direction, but she couldn't tell me something that I probably needed to know.
Yeah, and build. So after We got therapy after we had the miscarriage, and we're in therapy for months. There came a point where they were like, okay, she was like, okay, you're fine. It's just like, we're done.
Right.
And our joy had came back and was like, and then we got pregnant like a few months later. When my son was born, I got postpartum depression, or whatever it's called for the father, paternal postpartum depression. And you were talking about some of the things that bring on suicidal thoughts. That's a good thing. And the research says it starts in the 3rd trimester for mother and father. So we're anticipating, and all the pressures of being a father and being a man and all that stuff started coming up. So I was like, I have to find a primary care physician and a therapist. And the first therapist, we were good, but I'm like, it was in the morning. And I'm like, that ain't. And then I got this white guy, and we were good. We were vibing. And I'm like, So, and it's hard to like, it's not working out. You're the helper, you're the professional. I'm like, you're good. I'm like, it's just not working out.
Yeah.
And then I was able to, I'm like, okay, my day is from 5 or 6 a.m. till 8 at minimum. I need somebody in the evening because I'm a father.
Right.
Man, most of my therapy sessions have been at 8 o'clock. And I'm like, man, I'm glad I found it. And I was able to put in, it's a virtual platform, and able to put in the things that are important to me. And I love it. And there are minority Adventist therapists. There's a lot more now than when I was coming up. There was like none. But there's private practices now. Whether they'll take insurance on a sliding scale. They have support groups. Gary Graham out of New York has a support group on grief every Monday night. Been doing it for years.
Oh, wow.
The guy out of Baltimore, he has like 20 Black therapists in our counseling. David Defoe out of Maryland. When I went to his website once and I saw all the Black therapists, when I say Black, I mean Black Caribbean, African American, Black South American, and African American. I started crying. I'm like, I've never seen that many Black therapists before. I went with another practice, but I was like, wow. So I refer usually those two people, Gary Graham and David Defoe. But to be able to find a therapist that you have rapport with, and that you trust, because that's the foundation of all healthy relationships. Can I be safe? Can I be my authentic self with them?
Yeah. There's no shame or anything wrong with finding the right therapist. If you gotta shop around per se, hey, break up with the therapist, find the next one. It's okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's A-okay.
I did the same thing with my coach. Advent Health gave us mental health coaches. I broke up with like 5 of them. I'm like, this ain't working. I'm like, you know what? Let me. So, and that's empowering your own. We have a saying in grief: become the CEO of your grief. Become the CEO of your wellness. Of your health.
Take charge.
You paying for it,
Hey.
and you have to live with you all your life. What is one of those philosophers said, "To thine own self be true," or maybe Solomon. I don't know. One of them. Be honest with yourself, and if this ain't working for you, it ain't working. And be like, okay, this ain't best for me, so I'm gonna find what's best for me.
So as we wind down, I think you started something that's actually a good continuing spot. I would say, what can we start doing today to help someone who may have suicidal thoughts? And so, as we mentioned before, I would say, I'm not gonna say assume everyone's suicidal, that's not what I'm saying, but treat people with the sensitivity of you don't know what people are going through.
Right.
And so keeping that in mind, making sure that you're kind to people, that goes a long way. That can make somebody live another day. You can buy them the time that they need, and kindness is free. And so, making sure that you do that. If you haven't seen someone in a while, this is like a church related one or, whatever it is. Like, don't necessarily jump to the oh, stranger.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
just
my
like,
gosh,
and
that's
I know,
such a
it's like, I've done it before. I'm just like, oh, like you're
Yeah.
a stranger, but it's just like, really flipping the script of like, I'm happy to see you.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
that's
like
for yeah.
those are some things where you may not totally understand, and you don't mean harm by even saying something like
Nah.
that,
It-
but it's really how you position
Myron
it.
Edmonds, he got a men's support group, and they reposted a thing about checking on your strong friends. Like, how do you check on people? Like, you invite, but you're not, hey, stranger, like, send them a text, I'm thinking about you. Like, there's levels of vulnerability, levels of transparency when you're just, like, I'm just thinking about you. And it's not like, let's say you're not hugging somebody, you're just touching, you're just finding creative ways to touch people.
Right.
And letting them know you're a safe space
It's
within
super
reason.
important.
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah.
and Shane, you were touching on something called passive suicide, correct?
Yeah. I thought
Yeah.
on the
So
notes.
okay, so passive suicide, right? So I didn't even really know that was kind of a thing, or it actually had a name. Like I knew about like active suicide, but passive, like the thoughts, I didn't know that's what it was actually called, because I've experienced it before in my life. Especially when I was in the military, and like being a combat veteran, having PTSD diagnosed. I didn't
Yeah,
self-diagnose
yeah.
myself. Having mental health counselors and going through all that, psychiatrists and all of it. I've been through it. And the first time I kind of like recognized it was first deployment, right, in Afghanistan, when we first got there. 20 years old, wet around the gills, combat environment. Literally my first day out on the wire, well, outside of the gates, for anyone that doesn't understand, outside the wire, I saw a 10-year-old with a shotgun. So that was my first experience, like in the bushes with a shotgun. Like I didn't know what to do. I was like, am I shooting at this kid or what? So going through that, working for our first, we worked 22 days straight, 12 to 16-hour shifts. Wow. I remember during those days, my mom used to always message me and tell me to read Psalms 91, right? To the point to where I just got, okay, mom, I get it. I already know what you like. I would see her name pop up. I was like, I already know what you're about to say. Psalms 91, right? However, I got to a point to where I would be in the gunner seat, right? Because I was a gunner, So 4-man formation, I'm the back gunner, right? Holding down the back of the formation. So there was a point I was at my lowest. I didn't care if I lived. I didn't care if I died. I wasn't even looking at my fields of fire, right? I was just in the seat on the gun with my head down in a very dark place, right? So, and out of nowhere, our squad leader came over the radio and was like, hey guys, we've been really working hard, 22 days straight, all this stuff. And, I was reading the Bible today, and this verse stood out to me. Guess what she read?
He that dwelleth in the secret place.
There you go. And man, I started crying.
Wow.
And like people are looking up at me, and I was like, "Hey man, you good, man?" Yeah, it's just that dust in my eye, you know what I'm saying? But I never knew what to call that. That was those passive thoughts that I've had before in my life. So now that I understand it, I can better put a grasp on it and call it by its name. So, but yeah, that's
I was after we had when I first got married, when I bought the house, I proposed, and then I went and got insurance. I got insurance on the house, whole life, term life. Man, I'm over-insured. and then one of my boys was like, "Man, we're worth more dead than alive." And I'm like, "Man, you're right."
Yeah.
And we was just joking. And then sometimes I'm like, "Man, what if?" And then those thoughts you go down the rabbit hole, like 30 seconds or whatever. But I'm like, if you combine that with all the other stuff we've been talking about, that can be a dark place.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And then, of course, I shared that with my wife one day, and she's like, that's not true. of course, what I thought she would say is don't think that, which
Right.
is counterproductive. And she was like, no, I don't want, I wouldn't want all of those things. You're the prize, not what you can do. And a lot of times we're judged by our productivity, what we can do, what we can, how we look, and how those are all lies.
Mm-hmm.
Because no one will say, I'd rather have the money than have the person.
Mm-hmm.
I will go out on a limb and say there's no research anywhere. Well, that's if the person was.
There's no absolute.
There's
no majority.
But majority of people would say, I don't want the inheritance. I want the person.
Right.
I'm like, well, if the person was
I
evil.
just got flashbacks of Medea plays.
Like,
There's someone out there, but the majority for sure.
You think about the football players, and they're like, man, none of their kids would say, I'd rather have the house, the cars, the stuff. Like, no, I want you.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people go back.
But
and
you
say,
think you can get so caught up with that, and think that.
I wish I had one more day. Like it's just like it's not usually. I wish I had one more dollar. In comparison, it's like I wish I had another day with this person.
More time.
And so that's. I'm glad you said that. It's also really thinking through that. It's just like, sometimes people think they're a burden. Life would be better without them. All that type of stuff.
And that's what
and it's not that they're selfish, because like a lot of people that when they're left behind, they're like, yo, that person was so selfish. Like they didn't think about what that's going to do to us. And it's not necessarily that, because some people do feel like, life would just be better for themselves and for the people that they love. But it's just really the reality is that the people that you love would 9 times out of 10 rather have you than everything else, even in the broken state. It's just like, no, I'd rather have you here. You're important. And it's important to like really go about life is hard, affirming people and like affirming yourself. And so like that's one of the tips, like listen bravely, resist the temptation to give advice and a lecture, especially on the front end. Just be a listening ear, and it's avoiding the platitudes immediately of it'll get better. You have so much to live for. Avoiding that at the forefront and just like I'm here for you. I'm here to listen, and I'm here to listen in a way that's not judgmental. But then providing resources, and so this is one part of the show as well. It's just like in case you or someone that you may know there's might need some assistance, there are ways. So hotlines are one of them, and it's like it's a free way to like, hey, dial 988 and get that help, right? And it's so they'll connect you. They'll listen if they just need to listen to you. You can even text now, so it's not even just calls, but you can actually text as well. So it's like they're providing ways to do that. So definitely look up 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Encourage professional help. Of course, maintain a safe environment and plan for safety. So if you're a person that's thinking about it, you shouldn't surround yourself with like things like pills, weapons, or anything like that. Just make sure your place and your space is as safe as possible. Connect with community. You know, connect with like someone that you can trust. Take that, and if you have to, go to the hospital. Like there's really no shame. There's people that are there to help you.
One of my, I guess she's a peer now. She found one of my sermons on YouTube many years ago, and she contacted me, and she was like, I suffer from suicidal thoughts, and I tried to harm myself. And she went through therapy and everything. And one day she was on the mend, and she's in ministry. And she said, I just had to go to the therapist today. That's fine. And the therapist was like, just some days you're going to feel like you don't want to live. Even though you're doing well, even though you're on medication, even though you're exercising and have people that love you. Like some days, or some parts of some days, you just feel like it's raining on you. It might be 5 minutes, it might be an hour. It's just a part of who you are. It's going to be a part of your existence. And sometimes people will think getting help will be weaponized against them. So you'll have I've had social workers that I've worked with, they didn't want to get therapy, didn't want to use their insurance to get therapy within the system because they're like, once I get diagnosed, because you read your medical records, and I'm like, what? They got to put a diagnosis on it. I'm like, man, I got that. Or that sometimes it's overdiagnosed. Sometimes it's like, whoa, I didn't know those were the words. So sometimes people fear that their mental illness or mental health challenges will be used against them.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you have to be committed, and I think Obama made this illegal under the Obamacare, where you can't lose your job because of seeking mental health or help for substance abuses. If you had to go into a facility for 5 days, I think it's 72 hours. But what if that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? And like you're gonna. So having a supportive manager and be like, and I know the managers I know, okay, we don't need, it's a mental health thing. And that's between the employee and the manager.
Yeah.
And HR knows, but nobody else needs to know. And it's for seeing that type of support professionally in different places where I've worked, different hospitals and different companies has been a beautiful thing. They're out, they have depression. They're going to be out for 4 weeks. You cover them. I got it. Okay. You come back when you're, man, when growing up, you just going to be on unemployment line.
On top of everything else.
On top of
sheesh.
everything else.
I did want to share this last thing, and if you can listen to this, I was thinking about like what has a person that's thought about suicide, like what would they say as advice? And so this is the message that they gave. They're mixing the reality of life also with scripture, and this is what they said. One of my therapists gave me this advice: don't make major life decisions while depressed. Your brain is lying to you. And if you make decisions based on faulty information your brain is giving you, it would be the wrong choice for the future you who can look at the world with more balance. Feeling like everyone hates you, for example, is classic depression lying brain. It feels real and it sucks. I'm sorry you have to go through this. The people in our life make mistakes and are selfish and say dismissive things. Then our depressed brain jumps to the very worst conclusion, that they hate you or it doesn't get better. They don't. They're just struggling to get through the day just like you are. Regarding God's love for you, please know that Jesus loved you so much he died for you, and he knew it would hurt. If your brain is telling you that God doesn't love you, that's just one more faulty lie from a depressed brain. God knows sadness. He knows despair. He cares for us and is with us in our darkest times. I remember during my worst days, I felt like God was the only one who knew my sorrows. He was the audience watching every minute of the movie of my life.
Wow.
And so some of the text she shared was Psalms 56:8. You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. Psalms 139, 1 and 2. Oh Lord, you have examined my heart and you know everything about me. You know when I sit down or stand up. You know my thoughts even when I'm far away. He wants to comfort us. 2 Corinthians 1:3. All praise to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. God is merciful, Father, and the source of all comfort. Psalms 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed. God's love is perfect, and he doesn't forget any of us. He cares about us. Romans 8:39. No power in the sky above or in the earth below. Indeed, nothing in all creation will ever separate us from the love of God that is revealed in Christ Jesus. Psalms 36:5, your unfailing love, O Lord, is as vast as the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches beyond the clouds. While you wait for the medicine to kick in, keep reading, keep praying, and trust that God loves you, even if your brain says it's not true. And then lastly, she said, Philippians 4:6 and 7, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you'll experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. And one thing I really appreciated about her sharing her experience and sharing that is she's a living, breathing example of it doesn't always stay there. And all these scriptures show a God that's speaking directly to your situation. It's not like, just the joy of the Lord is my strength, which is a good text, but it's just like, he sees your tears. But that's not where it ends. It's just like, he's that comforter. He's your peace. And so even when people don't understand you and you don't feel like you have anywhere to go, and we're giving you, resources for life of hotlines, websites, experiences, which I'm glad you guys shared. Just remember that there's one person that truly has seen every moment of your life, and he chose you for a reason. Amen. And if you haven't experienced it yet, you don't know the why, you've lost the hope, he's willing to give that to you again, but you have to give him your real authentic self. That's where it begins. So,
and that might be in a psych facility. It might be an inpatient.
It could be a lot of different things.
I couldn't imagine being a resident and an employee of the same psych facility. That would be
that'd be very interesting.
That would be very interesting. And again, that's why he was the father of modern chaplaincy. That honesty, but also that transcendence, God and ministry and theology and Jesus, while at the same time talking about his thoughts and his struggles and his addictions. I'm like, man, that's
crazy.
That's got to be powerful. I'm telling you.
Powerful. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us for this this topic. Hopefully that you've learned something, you've been inspired, whatever it is. We invite you to share this. It's not only on YouTube, but it's on all podcasting platforms that you listen to. You never know if this could be the thing that saves someone's life. So definitely do that. We have a couple things to share with you, and then we can pray. But if you haven't liked this video yet, it's a simple thing to do. It helps our ministry. Yeah, just hit that Make sure you're subscribed. There's other episodes as well that you can watch or listen to as well. So make sure at The Walk Live you follow us. We have a website as well, thewalklive.org. We have some events that we want you to know about. If you're in Kissimmee, Orlando, if you can take a drive, we have several things. So tomorrow for our boys and girls ages 12 to 18, we have Boys and Girls Club at 7 p.m. We want you to look a little nice. You don't got to be super formal, but we got some stuff for you. So make sure if you have kids ages 12 to 18, make sure you bring them here at 7 p.m. at Mount Zion Seventh-day Adventist Church. Then the following Saturday night is game night for everyone. It's at 8 p.m. So we want you to come out, just relax, enjoy some free refreshments, just have some fun, get your mind off of things. I know Saturday night's your night, but let's share it. All right, let's just share it. All right, come out next Saturday, September 28th at 8 p.m. But I'm so excited about Homecoming, October 25th and 26th. I want to make sure you know what's happening. So Homecoming is Friday night, kickoff with a worship night at 7:30 p.m. Then Saturday, we're kicking off the morning with complimentary breakfast at 10 a.m. They're for the free. $3.99. We're not just going to give you... We're not going to just say it's free and then give you something you're not going to like. Right. So you're going to enjoy a good breakfast. So come on out at 10 a.m. Then we're going to transition into workshops, and we're happy to have author Natasha McCoy speaking to the women and Dr. Myron Edmonds speaking to the men starting at 10:30 a.m. You're not going to want to miss it. Then we're going to transition into the worship service for a collective worship experience. And then you get a little bit of a break, but we want you to come back at 7:30 p.m. for a night of soul. And that's free admission. We're going to have international flavors for sale. So you're going to want to make sure that you usually like coming out of that, so hopefully you're available. But I've looked at the menu, and the menu looks really solid, and you're going to have a lot of options. So it's a great weekend, October 25th through 26th. You can find out more at mtzionsda.org. And then look for the events section or Homecoming 2024. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us as a
Yes,
guest.
for
I really
sure, for
appreciate
sure.
your perspective.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for even sharing your story or
Yeah, it's
testimony.
powerful,
And
CJ,
of
I'm
course,
telling you.
always the resident Andre as well.
Yes, sir.
Glad to be back as well. So I could pray.
Mhm.
And let's head out. So, dear Jesus, thank you so much for everything. You are a good God. Thank you for being a God that sits high, as I said, and looks low, and you see every detail. You know the number of hairs on our head. You know us before we were born. But you decided that we should be here. We should be here for an exact purpose. So, for the people that are feeling hopeless, for the people that are feeling lost, they don't know what to do next, for the people that are holding on by a thread, I pray that they feel your comfort, your peace like never before. I pray that we become the community and maintain the community that is here to love and help and just reflect in a physical way what you've provided for us. I pray that for anybody that is in need of help, that you give them and help direct them to the resources that they need. Help them to know that even though it may feel like it's sorrowful and there's no hope right now in this season, that there's a season that you want to bring them to. And so I pray that they just know, like never before, that you are there, you care, and you're waiting to bring them to a higher height. I pray for any of the prayer requests of our viewers and listeners. You know exactly what they need and when they need it and how they need it. But I pray that you'll just do what you do best and make a way out of no way. Help them to know that this is you, and that it could have happened through their own strength or through anything else of anybody else, but that it was through you. And I'm praying and I hope that through the miracles that you're getting ready to do for the lives of all of us, that we just give you the praise and the honor that you truly deserve. We love you and we praise you for everything. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Thank y'all for watching. We'll see you on the next.
Yeah.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Before you go, make sure you like us on all social media platforms at The Walk Live and find us on any of your favorite podcast platforms. Our journey doesn't have to end here. Join us on the next walk.